Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at a release from the Big Finish monthly range, which did in fact come out quite a number of years ago. I decided to pick up this story recently, I listened to it, and I thought, you know what, I'll review it as well. I may as well, because it is a decent, enjoyable story. I wish to share my appreciation for this episode, and surprise, surprise, it features Colin Baker as the Sixth Doctor. I bet you couldn't see that coming, could you? It is, of course, Doctor Who 1963 Space Race. Now, this is one of the later releases as a part of the monthly range from around 2013, of course, and this part of the monthly range is now going out of print. They're very quickly going out of print. It is in fact quite scary, but I decided to pick this release up before it goes out of print physically. It will always be available on Big Finish via download. However, I wanted to own this story physically because it has intrigued me for quite some time. One of the things with the Big Finish monthly range that I think puts quite a lot of people off listening to it, especially when it comes to purchasing the CDs, is that there is a lot of them. Of course, I do believe the line ended on release 275, and it is of course £14 or £15 pretty much for one singular 4-part Doctor Who story of around 2 hours long, and as a result it is quite a commitment to make to purchase a story for that price, because it is quite expensive, especially when you have box sets on Big Finish website as well, usually at pre-order price for around £20, so you do need to make quite a leap if you are going to purchase a monthly range story at full price, and that is why I purchase the vast majority of mine when they are on sale. So Space Race is an episode that I'm so glad that I purchased, because I got that funny feeling when listening to it within the early half that I'd made the right decision, and this is a story that I would most certainly get along with. One of the first signs that I had of that when listening to this story was that I didn't really want it to end. I already got to the end of part 1 and I thought, ooh, this is looking up to be a pretty decent story if the plot continues to develop in the way that it had throughout part 1. And then I listened to part 2 and I decided not to continue listening to the story for that day, because I wanted to savour the episode, I wanted to savour the plot line. I suppose in a way in my head I kind of wanted to replicate the viewing experience that classic Doctor Who viewers would have had back in the day, where you actually get to have a cliffhanger and you need to appreciate it and wait to see what happens next, which is something that I think, especially for me, when listening to the monthly range, I don't tend to do. I tend to listen to the entire episode in bulk, and as a result perhaps some of those cliffhangers go unappreciated. I've had Doctor Who 1963 Space Race on my radar to listen to for quite some time. Firstly because it features the Sixth Doctor and every one of his stories is on my radar to listen to at some point, but also because the whole concept of this story intrigues me greatly. I figured that now would be a good time to finally pick this story up, as I'm about to start my law dissertation on humanity in space and the legal implications of that, and a story which focuses around humanity's first steps into space most certainly ticks those boxes of interest. The tensions between America and the Soviets are on the increase within the Cold War, one of their main competitions for power being the first state to travel into space and to land on the moon. The Sixth Doctor and Peri land right in the middle of these tensions with the launch of Vostok 7. This story is a part of the 50th anniversary 1963 monthly range trilogy. Previously I listened to and reviewed Fanfare for the Common Men last year and loved it, and I listened to Space Race and adored it, so who knows, the third and final release is the Assassination Game with the 7th Doctor, and I may add that one to the list to listen to at some point as well, because so far this has been a very strong set of stories indeed. I find it fascinating that the whole narrative of this story is born out of the very year Doctor Who first aired, a very different world with very different yet still impressive technology. Doctor Who has been around for so many historical events, and as fans we've seen it grow along with the world around us. It's funny because it is a show all about time travel, but the actual show itself has almost time travelled in the way that it is created, recorded, produced, and I find it baffling that within our phones that we carry around on a daily basis, that very phone probably has more technology within it than the entire equipment used to film the first ever Doctor Who story. Episode 1 instantly grabbed my attention, having a space flight go wrong and the cosmonaut within it completely lose her understanding of virtually everything. With the Doctor and Peri pretending to be professionals sent from Moscow, it's their responsibility to try and help, whilst their real identities go undetected. This story has a lot at stake, and I love how hands-on the Sixth Doctor is, whilst Peri also has her own mini subplot as we see a more personal side to those working within the Soviet base, including relationships between certain members of staff, but also who can trust who. One thing that ties the entirety of this episode together is that there is quite a lot at stake, and as a result this episode did remind me quite a lot of the likes of Mind Warp, The Two Doctors and Vengeance on Varos, and even Revelation of the Daleks too, I suppose, in the context of things, because all of those stories within the Sixth Doctor era have quite a focus on body horror. Of course, within Revelation you have them using the deceased to make food to ship out to other colonies around the universe. Thanks for that, Davros, the great healer. Then you have Vengeance on Varos, which is basically a Doctor Who bloodbath, well, a blood acid bath at that point. Then we have the Two Doctors, which I can recall also had quite a lot of potential use of knives. There was meat getting chopped up as well. Of course, Shockeye, who always creeped me out as a kid. It really did. Really creepy character, but done so very well. This episode also has quite a lot of those body horror moments. So we have the burnt out car at the very beginning. People have been killed because of the information that they know. So as a result, you already know some quite powerful people are at work here. And then throughout the story, there is certain elements of possible body detachment and then being attached in other areas, which is baffling. It starts to add another element to the story where you think, this is shaping up to be quite unusual, and I'm not going to mention why certain body parts get removed, but it does have quite a grim twist at the very end, which I quite liked. I think in moderation, certainly it works very well, and the Sixth Doctor era does have a habit of having rather dark stories, and this is an episode that, when you think about it for a while, it is indeed quite a dark episode, but there is also a fundamental human link in there as well, and kind of the reasoning behind it kind of gives a certain section of society more attention, and they finally have their feelings being heard, which, if you've listened to this episode, you will know exactly what I mean. But if you haven't listened to this story, then let's just say you probably can't predict what I'm referring to. One of the highlights of this story for me is that we get to see the Doctor actually go into space, which sounds ridiculous given that it is one of the foundational pillars of what makes Doctor Who Doctor Who. But this time we get to see Sixie travel with the technology that humans have made, as opposed to the slick time travel of the TARDIS. It's functional, yet dangerous. There's blackouts as the cosmonauts struggle to remain conscious on liftoff, and that sense of feeling very far away from home. There is a brilliant scene as one of the scientists and the Doctor stand on the lunar surface, complemented superbly by the music of Howard Carter, making the audio production feel so very visual and cinematic. And at the same time, that whole concept of going actually into space in this piece of technology, which the only way to truly test it is actually going up into space and seeing if it works. These cosmonauts are putting so much on the line for the sake of progress, and I think that this episode kind of gives us a glimpse into that. Jonathan Morris has managed to create a serious, threatening plot built from an intense period in human history, whilst also adding elements to the narrative which make it beautifully absurd. All aspects of the narrative intertwine so very well, giving us a mini history tour on the space race during this time, mission failure and success, whilst also tying in other world events, turning this piece into an action-packed ride. There is lots of twists and turns, a number of character revelations and mystery as to what the alien force actually is, whilst raising important questions on how humans treat one another and the animals they share the Earth with. This episode is bonkers in the most perfect way. I think that it is a beautiful Doctor Who story because it has a rather serious undercurrent, but also plain, beautiful stupidity at the same time. I could imagine this Doctor Who story being like a rather grim Pixar film, or even a comic actually, because it is quite fast-paced and very visual. I could imagine the Sixth Doctor being stood on the lunar surface. I could imagine him going up in a rocket, and the Soviets in their little base with all their components and rockets, carrier bunkers all waiting as these rockets go up into space. It's a very visual story, and as a result I found it very easy to be captivated by this one and actually follow the story through and the various characters along the way as well. I thoroughly enjoyed going into this one not knowing anything of what's to come, so I'm trying my best to share my excitement for this story, while simultaneously not telling you exactly what I'm excited about, and let me tell you, it is very difficult indeed. What I will say though, however, is that if you are a fan of history remaining as accurate as possible, this story may not be for you. It's not like a pure historical where we must keep events of the timeline in order with a sprinkling of Doctor Who. Instead, this episode tweaks history slightly, creating a dividing line between actual events of those in the know and the everyday humans watching the history unfold. Doctor Who 1963 Space Race is a bold, enjoyable story with such a dramatic backdrop ranging from the Earth's surface and orbit. There's bleak moments, drama, suspense, characters backstabbing each other, and this episode is frankly a little bit barking mad at times as well. So from all of the releases within the Big Finish archive, am I happy that I picked up this one and finally listened to it? Was it worth the wait? Yes, I certainly think it was. This is a very strong Sixth Doctor story. I found it highly enjoyable from both Nicola Bryant and Colin Baker. I think that their dynamic is as strong as ever, and I can't wait to see Big Finish expand that relationship in the future, because we've got to see quite a number of stories between the Sixth Doctor and Peri recently, the likes of the Memories of a Tyrant, Emissary of the Daleks trilogy. All of that was very fun and kind of expanded on that relationship that we got to see on screen, that rather rocky relationship to start with, but Big Finish are developing that and showing a more balanced relationship and two people that do very much care for each other. And I've referred to this in other reviews as well. There's something about the Sixth Doctor and his friends that, yes, all Doctors hold their companions quite close to heart, but with the Sixth Doctor, I feel like if you are in his inner circle of friends, then you kind of know you're in safe hands, and he treats his friendships very, very carefully and with a lot of attention. And of course, ultimately, has this story got me in the mood to write my dissertation? You know what? I think it has. I think that there's something very, very interesting about space and human interaction with space as well, especially when it comes to putting people up into orbit and actually having humanity expanding out into the universe. Of course, we've got very, very used to being on Earth, and as we are now in 2021, we are seeing people going up into space. Admittedly, rich billionaires, but we're seeing people going up and actually deciding, you know what happens if we put another base on the moon with the Artemis Accords? What happens if we expand out and travel to Mars? Are we able to have a colony on Mars and an actual society being born? It's all very exciting questions, and something of which that is very, very recent and very relevant. It's something that we're going to need to answer quite a lot of questions for in the near future, because where people go, so does legal responsibility as well. So what restrictions are going to be in place? How are we going to ensure that the society in space is going to be a safe one and not one that is merely accessible for those with lots of money? And what scientific developments are going to come from that as well. So yes, it's many different exciting ideas, and as a Doctor Who story, I think that this episode does a good job of kind of briefly talking about those early ideas of space travel, but also fundamentally at the same time, that excitement is still there. This is an episode of Doctor Who set within the 1960s. The ideas and excitement within this story is very much of the time within the 60s, but equally there is that shared excitement even now, going back to the moon and travelling out into space. I think this episode replicates that excitement perfectly. So there we have it. That is my review of Doctor Who 1963 Space Race. I really hope you have enjoyed it as a little additional bonus Big Finish review. So yes, thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.